Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we are joined by special guest Brian Begy to talk about the transformation of a company from internal software to the SaaS model. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. So my name is Brian Begy. I'm a senior software architect, staff engineer level. I've been banging around the industry for about 20 years now, with more or less success in a number of places.
Yes, and I was at a place where we had more and then less success.
they tend to go together.
They go well and then they don't.
Separated by time.
Yes. So I asked you to come on because I wanted to talk to you because I know you've been involved in 2 or 3 companies that transition from, hey, we have software that runs our business to we want to package up and sell this software so other people can run similar businesses. And I wanted to talk through, kind of how that went, because it's a changing business model. It's from we're going to be a X to we're going to help other people be X. And also how the software transform went or didn't go and lessons learned.
Sure. So it's a super interesting sort of project to get involved in. And I've never seen it succeed. So I guess the lesson of this is, for the most part, it is just not possible to change an organization's DNA to that degree in a way that I've seen it happen.
Interesting. So did the software migration part not work, or the company didn't change enough to make it?
It was the latter, right? The companies, in no case could the company let go of their previous identity and their previous way of doing things well enough to build a product for customers. Because you're talking about switching basically from being a B2C customer or where C might be defined as another business organization, but it's not a peer, to being a B2B company where your customers are suddenly people who otherwise would have been your peers. And I've seen it's possible to start to succeed in this, at least if your business is not particularly idiosyncratic, where everybody is doing the same thing. I can see where this might work. But it strikes me that in many cases, the problem is every customer's needs are a little bit different. They're certainly different from yours as a trailblazer in automating this industry. And as a result, you're just not well prepared to make that jump. And it's part of it is a change in where decisions get made. You start having people like product managers and product owners who are responsible for making sure you're building something your customers love, as opposed to your previous incarnation in which you just needed to serve your B2C customers, and their opinions were they were very different than what you have when you're trying to sell to business.
Let's maybe we go for a concrete example.
Sure.
Because I think one of them, you were working at a auto collision or auto repair.
Yeah, I was in the insurance space.
Okay, so it was insurance. So somebody, this was software where somebody has crashed their car or had an accident, and they need to take pictures, and then the insurance company needs to.
And it worked great, and that's why everybody wanted it.
Okay, so their software worked really well. So, but you were working for an actual insurance company, or this was a company that was contracted to an insurance company?
It was a company that was contracted to insurance companies, and then they wanted to get out of the business of servicing and go from being the kind of margins you have where you've got humans doing work enabled by software to the kind of margins where you're selling software that scales in, the sales scale infinitely. You can sell as many widgets as you want because it's just a license, and a little hosting costs. And the challenge is that organizations are very different. So if you decide to get into bed with a giant insurance company and they're going to operate your software, you suddenly have all of their business processes, which may not be yours. You're integrated much deeper. You're not like an arm's length service provider for them anymore. You need to be deeply integrated in what they're doing, and you need them to be a much higher degree of partner than perhaps they were before.
Wow. Okay. So they were they were selling they were selling software, or they were licensed software for insurance companies, and they managed the software. So they were providing a service to the
They
insurance
provided a
companies.
service to the insurance companies. They would manage the claim for you.
Okay.
Hmm.
And they wanted to switch to, they would provide the service, the software to the insurance company.
Yeah. Yeah. So you no longer need an army of people, right? You need
Right.
doing work. You need a smaller army of engineers building software that enables people on other people's payroll to do the work.
Interesting.
Now, I can't speak to whether it eventually succeeded. I honestly didn't try that long before I said, okay, this isn't for me. And there was another opportunity available that was a lot closer to what I'm good at. So in this particular case, there were a number of things that were challenging. One of them was suddenly interfacing with your a deeper integration with business partners, where there's more of their process involved. A change from being we only care about the B2C end user customer to all of a sudden the B2B, the business customer is more important, and we have to listen to them.
Well, you would no longer be dealing with the consumer, right? So
no,
originally it would be the person who had the accident, and you're collecting their information. You want to make sure that they're having a good experience, and then there's some integration with the insurance company. Now you're only talking to the insurance company. You never talk to the customer.
You never talk to the customer. Yeah, and you're more deeply tied into their organization because the contact is much greater, right? You're no longer an adapter that they use to interact with customers. You're deeply embedded into their processes. So you're going from being a third-party module to being a service in their ecosystem. And that's a pretty challenging transition.
When you say at one point the job is no longer kind of for you, was that because of that transition?
No, it was more around I want to do things that are more engaged with what end customers. And having grown up being able to make all of the decisions, I think the organization wasn't really prepared for a world in which product managers and product owners had a role. Now, I'm not a product owner, I'm an engineer, but I find the value in what product managers and product owners do to be there and to be very important. So a lot of the decisions that leave came from questions of where decisions were getting made, that customer-centric decisions were getting made by engineering leadership. Architectural decisions were being made by engineering leadership, and that was the big red flag. And then there was another opportunity for an org that was much smaller, much earlier in its work, and with a number of challenges that fit really well with what I'm pretty good at. So it was a much better fit, and somebody at that organization I'd worked with before took me out to lunch and gave me the sales pitch, at which point I said, well, okay, I'm not enjoying this. I don't see in the short run how you make this transition without a big DNA change in the org. That's going to be hard.
Right.
And it's going to be rocky, and it may take 3 or 4 years. And I don't really have 3 or 4 years for this to start getting good.
So an interesting thing that I think you're saying, but I want to clarify, make sure. Did you have to do a lot of work transitioning the software from we are running the company to we are a SaaS?
No, you're going to love this. The software was a big rewrite in order to target the SaaS customer. So the effort was we have got an existing application stack. We don't have very much confidence in it because it's sort of a 2005, 2009, 2010 Ruby on Rails stack. So
what year was the rewrite? Or what year
this was
the
2018.
Okay, so at least 8 to 10 year old Ruby code.
Yeah, it was somewhere in that range, and it looked like Ruby code from 2009, right? So you can think about like, so I have kind of strong opinions on Ruby on Rails. I think it's a fantastic tool if your goal is to create technical debt as fast as you possibly can, because the happy path it leads you down is the big ball of mud, right? And there are organizations, and I've seen it, and I've talked to a couple of people who've done this. Root Insurance is one that jumps out as an organization that has imposed some discipline on the Ruby stack in a way that is not immediately obvious until you've kind of looked at it a little longer. I had a couple conversations with them a couple of years ago, and I was impressed. In order to get the kind of modularity you want in software without building totally separate microservices, right? Which is a whole other topic related to, whether you can use Lambda. This week's news story about Lambda versus microservices, the AWS conversation that everybody's talking about. Sorry, future listeners, Google it. Rails will lead you down a path if you're not careful of being a giant ball of mud. So faced with that challenge, the org said, well, we will build a new system.
In Ruby?
In Ruby on Rails. And then here is the part that kind of made me say, okay, this is not for me. We're going to do exactly the same things we did before.
Okay.
Because those are the patterns we like. And those are the patterns we think were good. And only a fool would build a microservice architecture. We want to build another monolith. And that's when I was out. Right? So
Got it.
I disagreed with that decision at the time. I thought it was a mistake. I may have been right or wrong. I don't know. And I didn't stick around to find out. So on top of those challenges, there's a big rewrite going on.
I didn't realize there was a rewrite going on top of all of that.
Yeah, it was the effort was we built this thing for our internal use and we can't maintain it anymore. We can't move it to the next level because it is such a Ruby ball. We've got, magic monkey patch things happening at runtime. Nobody knows what this thing is doing. Right. And that's the criticism I've got of Rails is that it lends you to that kind of thing.
That sounds like the criticism of PHP, which is it will let you shoot yourself in the foot really easily.
Yeah. I mean, the basic, the basic way the Ruby sidearm is designed is the barrel points at you. Right. And if you're careful, you can not shoot yourself with it. But now there are probably places where you want that. It's ideal if you want to start a startup, you want to knock something out very quickly, you want to sell it to somebody else and you want to make it their problem. Oh, fantastic. Right. But if you own one of these things, you've got a real maintenance challenge, unless your developers were incredibly farsighted to put yourself up in a good position. So it was a big rewrite on top of it. So we can see the strikes accumulating where it was like, okay, this is a hard corporate DNA change. It's going to take some really inspired leadership. I don't like how engineering decisions are being made, particularly architectural decisions coming from executives. 3, it's in this technical stack that I think lends itself to big ball of mud. 4, it's a big rewrite. 5, they're not even letting me build microservices to do this thing. So it's just the challenge. It's just simply too challenging for a lot of orgs, I think.
Was the company intending, while you were there at least, for the rewrite, were they using the rewrite internally on their own stuff while they were, or is it going to be running entirely separate?
That is the external facing version. Right. So it involved a bunch of interfacing with an external insurance company, a gigantic European monolith insurance company that had processes. And so on top of it, you've got kind of American startup culture world where you move fast and you sometimes break things up against, giant fintech insurance, which is pretty conservative. Oh, and did we mention they're in Europe too? So the cultural difference of how we're willing to work with data, how you're willing to work with people's information is very, very different. So it was things like, we're supposed to build a database, a data integration of some kind, and you're only allowed to connect to their development database by using a particular laptop and a power adapter, because the thing came from Ireland, with a VPN software that was 6 versions behind and didn't work with most of your browsers. Have fun. So, I mean, on top of it was stuff like that, where, there's a reason startup people sneer at these large established companies. And I think
enterprise software is
this was, I think, 100-year-old insurance company. So on top of all, so the challenges piled up. So any one of these challenges, like if you could cut the challenge down to a reasonable size and say, hey, we're going to change the company's DNA and we're going to do it without a big rewrite. We're going to do it incrementally. We're going to do it with customers who really get us and we're on the same vibe. And we're going to do it with people who are flexible in what they want to do and people who are willing to delegate decisions to the most appropriate level, i.e. your staff engineers make your technical decisions, your executives give them cover and make the strategic decisions, that kind of thing. Anyone, like if you took the challenges away, you might get to something where it is possible to succeed at this.
I guess hindsight's probably 2020 here, but I bet it's kind of hard in the moment to not think, wow, these folks are going down and almost intentionally picking the worst, most expensive, clunky, slow process imaginable. Like, do they want it to succeed at this point?
Yeah, I think for a lot it was the first time they'd failed at a software project too. So I don't think they saw okay, all of the warning signs are here, guys. This is not going to work. And that's a challenging thing to be on your first and say, okay, this isn't going to happen.
I guess they were so confident from winning.
Well, yeah, because if you've won, and they did win in the B2C space, like they were doing great. The challenges were more around, well, we see this other opportunity we want to move to, and underestimating the amount of change that was going to be required. And some of this is probably like the things that got you here aren't going to get you to the next step.
Right. It almost feels like the same vein of like a toxic positivity where everyone's like, no, man, we've got this. We can do it. We can do anything. And you're like, no, it's changed a bit from last iteration. This is a bigger ask than you're thinking you're asking.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the fact that they didn't have, like that they were successful running the software themselves, and it sounded like they were going to continue to run the software themselves for an infinite amount of time, right? They weren't planning to stop. Do you think that undercut the model as well, where the fact that they could always fall back to, like, they weren't burning the ships. They weren't saying, we are getting out of running our software and we're going to only sell it. Do you think that also undermined the project?
I think you'd have to keep that in mind, right? Because the fallback would always be, well, we did this over here and it works for us. And okay, well, the problem is that you don't own the whole problem anymore. You only own a part of the problem. So you have to think in terms of, your customer info provider has got to be it's got to be firewalled off from the rest of your data. Because it's coming from somebody else's source. Like it's some DB2 system that you're getting customer data out of. You don't own that. It's not your, and this was a MySQL shop. It's not your own MySQL database. You need to think about boundaries in your system in ways that you haven't had to before. And I think that goes back to like, well, monoliths were good enough for us when I wrote monoliths in 2009. So therefore, as an exec, now I'm going to make you build monoliths because that's good how you build software. And I think there was a culture clash between those of us who came in out of microservice world and we're like, yeah, obviously this thing is like 10 different services, because you're going to interact with third parties, and your rates engine or your, that's actually not the right problem they're trying to solve, but your coverage engine, you should assume your coverage engine is going to be some other service that is going to be independent from your customer database. So you have to think about that in advance, right? Otherwise you get, foolishness like trying to extract data from one, push it into another monolithic system, and then keep them in sync or stuff like that,
Yeah.
which is, exactly. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it. So I think there were a bunch of success that happened in monolithic applications where we control the whole thing, where we are the owners of the business, we are the owners of this problem space, had been successful. And then you bring that over to, okay, you're not the owner of the problem space anymore. You don't own all the parts of this thing. You've got to play friendly. You've got to think about separation of concerns very early. And then on top of it, like your technology stack you've chosen lends itself to big ball of mud. That's where, I said, this is never going to work. So it's time to, it's time to give somebody else a try to do this, and maybe they will succeed and maybe they won't.
Was there another case, another time that you were in a project that was a SaaS conversion?
Yeah, earlier I worked for a company that was in warehouse management. This was a customer of mine when I was a consultant. And they were doing basically a point of sale type system for unloading of trucks, which is an industry I had no idea exists. Truck drivers don't actually unload their own trucks. The warehouse company doesn't actually unload their own trucks. There are third-party contractors in the middle who do this stuff. And truck drivers hate them because they have to pay them, and warehouse people hate them because they're not under their, they're independents who can kind of mess up your operation if they do it wrong. So it's this weird little niche business. And I'd worked with a company that was in this business and built them some software that let them give them some visibility into all of the locations they were at. They were at a half dozen places. And it was just, made sure that the people on the job were doing the right thing. And this was 15 years ago. So the tech was pretty rough.
This is before not entirely before smartphones, but
yeah, smartphones were mostly before smartphones. So these things were desktop computers. On them were required to do things like print invoices to hand to truckers so that truckers can get reimbursed and stuff like that. And sometimes it was over dial-up modems, so it had to do stuff like work offline and then sync its work at night. This is dark ages technology stuff. And the environments were filthy and rough and anyway, so this was the business they were in, and it was a matter of going to basically their competitors and saying, hey, these guys that you think of as a competitor are actually going to become your vendor, and if we all kind of split this up, or if we all kind of use our software, you're going to make a bunch more money. And that was really more of a sales problem than anything, where like that pitch was not compelling. These were not technologically sophisticated customers or technologically sophisticated businesses. There were really only a couple of people who saw what this could do. And it was pre the ubiquity of mobile computing that we have today, where if you were going to go build this today, you'd be like, yeah, it's a smartphone app. And, you install it on your machine and you take a picture of the truck's number on the side of the truck and you click the button and it sends them an email with a link to download an invoice if that's what you need. So,
right.
That was a challenge more for the sales side of things that never really got off the ground, was around like, how do we convince our competitors that this is, you want to get with us and get involved with us, and we will help you make more money too.
So it sounds like in that case, the problem was, parts of the problem, they were still going to be running the business, so they were going to be a competitor.
Yep.
Certainly it was, earlier in the technology that made this possible, so it was hard to make the value.
Yeah, the value was less clear. It was less obvious why you would want this.
Since you had written the software, though, they didn't need to do a rewrite?
No, it was, we knew it from the start that it would be possible for locations to have different owners, and that you'd need to segment your users and things like that by owner. So built it multi-tenant from the start. So it was not a technical challenge. It was really more of a sales challenge. And then at some point, had they been successful, then it would have turned into a technical challenge where we would have to think, or a software product challenge around how do we make the features that our customers want that are distinct from the needs of running our internal business? And how do we develop things that are possibly competitive advantages for us without also handing those advantages to people who are competitors.
Right. It seems
or it's, yeah,
you'd have to get out of the business.
exactly. And that was the next sentence, was like, or you get out of that business and you say, no, we're software now. We're not logistics.
I wanted to go because you and I were involved in what was sort of a third incident.
Yeah, it was a sort of a third instance of this.
So
and that was, go ahead.
I was gonna say it was interesting because it wasn't a SaaS model, it was a franchise model where we worked for a company that has their name on a baseball stadium, and they had their software and they bought a competing company and they turned it into a franchise. And so wasn't simple, but what we actually did is we just created a second AWS account. We installed all the software and we said, okay, now there's 2 instances. And, the corporate did their corporation dancing stuff. And, there was now a holding company that owned the original company and the now second company. And okay, it's a service. And now I think they've done 3 or 4 of them. So kind of the franchise SaaS, but they're not really a SaaS though.
Well, that was my comment about earlier about an industry that is all the same, right? Because if you're in something like residential lending, the business processes are remarkably similar from lender to lender because the regulatory environment is so significant. It is less like this is how we do it and more how this is how we keep the government from destroying us because we have to follow all of their complicated rules. So there's a chunk of this that's going to be the same no matter how you do this thing. Everybody's got, the same reporting requirements. Everybody's got the same risk requirements. Everybody's got the same underwriting requirements. They all sell to the same banks to unload these loans. All of that's going to be the same. So that, that strikes me as a place where, okay, well, you could succeed at that. The challenge again would be around differentiating the services business from the SaaS business. If those are really confusing terms, what the operational business and its needs from the needs of selling SaaS, to where you can innovate in one without innovating in the other, or you innovate differently in the other. The technical side of that, of just standing up another stack, certainly achieved that, but I don't think in that case there was the product vision being articulated around, well, how are these products different? How does what we do internally differ from the SaaS offer?
Well, I don't think they did in that case because it was a pure franchise play.
Yeah, it was a pure franchise play. You're right.
The new company, like the new purchased company, had to adopt all. It'd be like if McDonald's bought a Burger King and it's like, okay, well, now you're McDonald's.
Yeah.
You were doing something similar because you were Burger King, but now you're McDonald's and you're going to do everything the McDonald's way.
Yeah. Which that strikes me as a successful way to go from being working, the old saw about working in the business to working on the business, right? The franchise model is the classic work on the business where you build a machine and then you let other people rent the machine to make money. That strikes me as somewhere where you can, but it's less of a SaaS play at that point, right? It's more about, you can also operate our business machine, not we're going to sell you a component of that business machine. Right? Because the former example back in insurance world was, we've got this machine, we're going to sell you a component of that machine and we'll rent it to you. And you can use it in your business. The franchise model is, we're going to rent you this machine and you can plug people into it and marketing dollars and branding and stuff like that.
Right. Well, franchise is a full business.
Yeah, it's a full business. Yeah, exactly. It's a full business ready to go. So like that strikes me as the model where this does work, right? Where if you've got a successful software enabled business, don't go into SaaS, franchise it.
I think that's a great place to leave it because that's like a high note right there.
There, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. It's the transition from running a company to, the idea that you're going to take your company and you're going to take the software that you use to run your company and turn that into a SaaS seemingly doesn't work because you're competing with your potential customers and the processes in your DNA, your company's DNA, are going to be different than other people's. Right? It's not a service play, but you could do it as a franchise play where you're saying you're going to do it our way, and our software works exactly right for the way we do it.
Yeah.
You add people. We're not a service, we're a franchise. You add people to our thing and turn cranks, and it makes money.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on,
Oh,
Brian.
thank you. This was great.
If people want to get in contact with you and tell you that you're right or wrong and have an argument on the internet
those are the most useful things to do.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm findable on the internet. Just Google my name and you'll probably find me. I don't have a blog or a SoundCloud to promote, unfortunately.
Are SoundCloud still a thing?
I believe they are, but only ironically. So I don't know. I think that's a piece I just missed. So yeah. So I don't have a SoundCloud to promote, but be nice to animals, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.